What's up, investors? This is Chase Thompson from the Note MBA podcast. We just got done recording this week's episode. In fact, I'm actually in the car headed to lunch. In this episode, we talk a little bit about what happened up in New Jersey at the Distressed Mortgage Expo. We talk about two different deals. One, a CFD happening in Oklahoma, and two, a deal that didn't go quite so well up in Canton, Ohio. Well, it's not that it went, well, you're going to have to listen to the episode to check it out. Anyway, if there's anything you want to hear us discuss on future episodes, be sure to send us an email at ask@noteba.com. And of course, you can always leave a comment in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for checking out this week's episode of the Note MBA podcast.
Oh, okay. I got a great answer. And it's me being snide, to be honest.
Okay.
Go create the situation you want. Stop asking other people to do it.
First, seconds, performing, non-performing? What the f***? Note buyers, when it seems like you're in this business alone, know Chase, Robert, and the rest of their tribe are at it every week. They're bringing updates from their own note businesses as they work to find, fund, and finish deals. Follow along as they share their grassroots education with you,
in the sense of asking for the philosophy.
If you'd like to know more about what they do and to download the entire back catalog, check out NoteMBA.com. Now, here are your hosts, Chase Thompson and Robert Woods.
What's up, investors? Welcome to the Note MBA podcast, your home for note investing on iTunes. I am Chase Thompson, joined as always by Mr. Woods. Mr. Woods, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm glad that we did not do this recording yesterday. I was slightly jet lagged from our trip up in Jersey, so I'm now fully rested, back at it, ready to go. And yourself?
I was still stabilizing electrolytes yesterday as well.
Yeah. I was going to say, I had there was a decent number of people, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about the Distressed Mortgage Expo itself, but a couple people, man, they were wondering how you were doing out in San Juan. We had a bunch of listeners out at that event. I'm sure you boys had a great time.
Puerto Rico was a blast. San Juan was fantastic. Happy to have visited, and we'll definitely be putting it on the return list.
Delightful. Wonderful. And it was a much shorter trip, like you mentioned, than driving all the way down to the Keys or something like that. So that's always good.
Yeah, it was good.
So I did actually, like I said, I just wanted to dive in real quick on the time spent out at the expo. Obviously, you had just come back from IMN before we recorded last week. And then this week, obviously, having just come off of this different event, different, I would say different goals, right? Depending on kind of what you're at. And for this particular event, I was just, I would like to give a shout out to everybody that stopped by, said hi, took time to show appreciation for the show. And, my favorite episodes are this, or, all of that kind of stuff. That was really neat and amazing. And there was a lot more of you there than I had anticipated. So I don't know what I expected, really. I didn't really have any expectations going into it, but it was delightful, and it was wonderful to finally meet a ton of people that hadn't emailed us before. I didn't know the name of these, some of these people before. And we had a bunch of people that we had sent books to that were I got my book in yesterday. I'm already diving in and things like that. So that was also wonderful as well.
I love it, dude. I love it. Speaking of, I just got a text about, I forgot to give Tonio his copy.
Yeah, well, luckily you don't have to mail that one out. So
I can see him in person.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So speaking of books too, that's good. We got that. I just finished another book today. David Glinsky got it, called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman.
The Way of the Peaceful. That title sounds really familiar. I don't know why, but maybe I'm thinking of something
potentially
else.
Why? Because it is now a major motion picture from Lionsgate.
Okay, maybe that's it. So what? Why? What's the gig? What's up with it?
Well, David sent it to me as a thank you. We got together right before his birthday. Yeah, I won't admit that he may have had a drink before he turned 21, but we got together and we're hanging out. And I'd given him a copy of that Cal Newton book, Deep Work, and he just shot me this over. just kind of as a thank you. But it was an awesome book. It was kind of a great read, and it'll come full circle into a couple things, because we had the goals episode. I had that flight out to Hong Kong, and it took me all of January to really finish my goals and really just say, hey, this is what I'm going to lock in. So I actually just finished that yesterday, which is awesome. And having read this book, I'd read Life and Air also earlier this month that Dan Zatosky had sent us. So they were really good books to balance out, like the weekly reading I'm doing, which is right now The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. And it was good. They were good opposing forces in the sense of balancing your mind and your life versus attainment to wealth.
Right.
And I think it's kind of it's a centering average where you're getting the best of both worlds, being influenced by both of those at the same time. But it's a great book. Anybody that is looking for more recommendations, again, I would say this The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman was a good book. Also awesome to get free books from friends. So I like that. And then even better when you enjoy them. So that was good.
Yeah, delightful.
But so speaking of reading, I'm going to get you here now because we didn't do any pre-production. How are you? What are you reading? And how are you doing with your list of minimal books that you were going to influence yourself with this year?
Right. So glad, as always, to kind of be called on the carpet. Not necessarily called on the carpet, but kept accountable as we talk about, accountability and all of that kind of stuff. I'm currently going through first, instead of kind of diving through the 4-Hour Work Week all the way, and then the 4-Hour Chef all the way, and then obviously Tools for Titans all the way, and that type of stuff. And then the other suggestions that you had given me, I have listed out on my wall calendar. I'm actually going through, I went through, I'd say about a quarter of the way through the 4-Hour Work Week, and then I stopped, and now I'm picking up actually the 4-Hour Chef to go through. For those that don't know, or those that aren't familiar with that particular book, the reason why it's called the 4-Hour Chef is it is about cooking, no question. But what he does is he uses cooking as a vehicle to explain the way that he goes about deconstructing and analyzing and working through potentially solving other kind of problems or complex systems and things like that. So I took a moment to kind of take a break from the 4-Hour Work Week to then jump into the 4-Hour Chef to get reacquainted with that system of the deconstruction, of breaking it out into small parts, of setting up stakes and those types of things. So that way, when I start to implement and execute against those things, the hiring of the VA, the setting up of almost the reverse engineering of goals that he has with his kind of Muse platform, that we both actually had, like that Muse worksheet. I think that was really great, that when we were on video the other day, you were showing me yours from forever ago. But so anyway, so when I go through that, making sure that I'm appropriately utilizing the goal of this whole experiment, which was not going through 100 books and using that as the marker for success, but really going through as few as possible and then doing as much as possible. So reading less, doing more in that way. So essentially, when Tim Ferriss wrote these books, he already had that method, right? Like broken down. He had that deconstruction and that type of method in his head. That's just the way that he approached problems. It's the way he approached coming up with solutions for his business and other things. And so in that vein, I wanted to make sure that I had that cemented in my head and kind of written out and working through it in that way. And to be honest, it's not the way that I naturally do this. So it's a really good exercise in kind of doing that and figuring out what that's going to look like for myself. So I put down that book to then make sure I can execute kind of throughout the year on getting through the rest of it. Though I have slightly cheated, I'm slowly reading the Tools of Titans is a huge book. And a bunch of people that were actually at this recent conference in New Jersey saw that I had it with me. And so I am slowly reading that because it's a little bit more digestible, in like tiny little chunks as you read through different people and kind of what they brought to, say, interviews with him or things that he learned from them. So I am kind of slowly almost kind of like doing that as a one person kind of daily reader sort of thing, just to pass the time because not reading a bunch of different books is kind of weird for me. But anyway, so that's where I'm at in it right now, is going through the deconstruction and going through that phase. I can't think of it off the top of my head, and technically the book is not right in front of me. There's a name for it. I'll probably list it all out in the show notes, so head over to knowtome.com for all of that. But the way that he actually goes through it, it's like a 4-part system. And I just, for some reason, it went blank on it. But anyway, that's currently where I'm at on it.
Interesting. Well, good. I like it. So that's good updates for life and reading and what we've been doing. What about the note business? What do you got going on?
Well, recently, so just yesterday, funded a deal up in Oklahoma. It's a CFD, which this will technically be the first CFD that I will be tackling in this way. For this particular one, I'm actually, it's kind of unique. As we get more into it, we're able to get into the property and things like that. I'll have more for the show itself. But it looks like the borrower in this case had done some capital improvements on the property. But the reason why we acquired it, of course, is that it was non-performing. So instead of paying bills, it looks like they did thousands of dollars of capital improvement to the property, which is kind of weird. And so we're going to kind of suss out what happened there and figure out kind of what was going on with that. And like I said, we'll have more kind of updates and what have you for that particular deal going forward.
You said Oklahoma. What'd you pay for this thing? What's it worth? Give us some juicy numbers.
Give us some juicy numbers here. I'll pull them all up if you want to kind of get a recent deal set up for yourself.
Yeah, I can tell you about a couple recent deals while you pull things up. I've got. Let's see. Actually, I'm looking right now at some stuff from a nightmare property manager in Canton, Ohio. No one worked with Hayes Property Management in Canton, Ohio, ever.
We don't tend to do too many D recommendations. Like, we have done some, but that's a pretty strong D recommendation.
This is why we're going into it. Anyway, so I've got a property in Canton, Ohio that we're selling. We picked up the note in June of 2014, right at $8,500. My BPO on it when we bought it was $27,000. So that's not too shabby. I was thinking it'd be okay. Foreclosure took a little longer than expected. We had some expenses due to taxes. We ended up having about $13,000, almost $14,000 in expenses. Mm-hmm. Those were mainly taxes, the foreclosure, and then we had to do some repairs. The property management company that we have on this, it's just not been a pleasure to work with. They were giving me accounting where it was like starting the 13th of the month and ending the 12th. And I'd asked like 4 times to have it done on a monthly basis. Yeah. And then I was like, I need a from inception accounting, couldn't get it. Checks weren't getting deposited. Now it's funny because as we're getting ready to sell it, we're getting bills that just popped up. We just got an email requesting for payment for work that was apparently, let me look at this original quote, almost 2 months old. And it says it's a quote, but I never okayed the repairs with an exact amount. So this will be interesting to deal with this kind of nonsense. The joys of property management. So this is what everybody talks about, this is when everybody complains about rentals. Mm-hmm. And the reality of this complaint is it's 100% on me. I didn't go interview and really vet the property management company. I just kind of let them put in place. And to be honest, this is it's such one of our low value assets, and it's all of our capital. I don't have a JV invest in this deal, so I'm okay putting a little less attention, making a little less yield on it because I'm doing it to myself to focus on higher, better deals and deals for clients. But I also have got property managers here in Florida and in Chicago where I don't do anything, and it's just everything works like clockwork. So, but a lot of that is how much time do we invest in the front end? And really, what do they call it? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Mm-hmm. Isn't that saying? Mm-hmm. And this situation speaks to it greatly. So we're going back to it. We're into it for about $22,000. Then we just had to replace a furnace. So now I'm into it for $24,000, and we are selling it for $40,000, and we're supposed to close on Monday of next week. So we've had this for 2.5 years. We should net somewhere around, I don't know, 10 grand, 10, 13 grand on it, 10 to 12 grand. Mm-hmm. I've got to double check. Well, when we get the HUD, we'll go over it. So it's like a 25-30% year over year return. It's nothing crazy, but it's a good return. I'm happy with it. I think we could have gotten a little bit more from the sale, but honestly, I just want to get out of the property. I don't want to deal with it. Canton is one of these places where if the tenant doesn't pay the bill, it comes to the homeowner as a borrower. So if the tenants just don't pay the bills, you were still liable for it. And then when I called to shut off the utilities, I was like, well, if they're not going to pay the bill, shut the utilities off. They're like, well, you can't do that. You have a tenant in the property. So it's one of those lovely double-edged swords where I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, that's fantastic. Tonio and I were going over that yesterday and going back and forth, and I was like, I'll just take care of it. And then just, like I said, the property management, even the other problem I have with it, though, is I know I did not do a good job finding the property manager and staying on top of them. And I allowed it to continue. So I made my own bed. So I can't be angry at anything in this situation but myself. It's just so disappointing that this person runs a business and this is the level of the quality that they do for other people's, they're managing other people's assets. And this is the quality that they give towards their clients. So anyway, as I said, that was Hayes Property Management in Canton, Ohio. I would not personally recommend doing business with them. This is not slander. I'm just saying this is not a Robert Woods Note MBA Next Gen Coastal Investments endorsement for Hayes Property Management in Canton, Ohio.
Yes. So lessons learned there. Obviously, vet a little bit more. I'm interested to hear. Once it's kind of finally closed and what those kind of final numbers look like you mentioned, kind of going over the HUD on that one. I know that there was some unique aspects of this one. So I'm interested to kind of get the full case study on that one and be able to share having a deal go that long, right? Like you had mentioned, you'd kind of taken some capital in throughout, but then there was also some expenses and things. So, but obviously you said July of 2014 on that one?
Yeah, so we bought it in June. So it was a year and a half to it becoming an REO.
Right.
So it was a long process. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff. The borrowers had filed a bankruptcy that wasn't a real bankruptcy, and it wasn't even dealing with this asset. It was to protect for their primary residence. Sure.
So anyway, once this one's fully closed, we can probably divulge and discuss a little bit more on that one for sure. And then the numbers on the deal that you're asking for the CFD, we had a UPB on this one of just south of 35K. So it's 34,762. The actual acquisition of it was 24,000. And we've got a kind of a market value of between 49 and 56. So we've got a local agent, boots on the ground, says about 49. We've got an RPR kind of CMA of 56. So that's what we're looking at with this particular project. So not the... And the exit strategy on this one looks like it's probably going to be foreclosure. So what is unique about this one is the borrower, and in this case, like I said, had done some kind of capital improvements and things. And so even though it's a CFD, there might be a foreclosure that has to happen as opposed to an eviction, things like that. So this one will also be kind of fun to talk about on the show once we kind of get in and really figure out kind of like what's going on with this particular deal. So, and that'll be much sooner rather than later. But so this one's going to be pretty interesting. And like I said, one of the things that we've talked about, I guess, with different people on the show, both with, we talked a little CFD with Jay Tenenbaum a couple episodes ago, Wayne Snell. I don't think we talked a ton of CFD with Adam Adams, though I think he has some familiarity, but we did link up in the show notes on those other two particular shows, and we'll do it again for this episode. CFDs have different rules for different states, different regions, different things like that. So it's also really important to kind of understand what you have available as far as options on those. So for a lot of places, if they've paid a certain amount, as terms for like loan to value, essentially. If they're down, say they paid 20% of that, you have to foreclose instead of evict, even though it's a CFD. Or if they've been in the property for a certain amount of time, you have to evict or foreclose over an eviction. So there's a lot of different things that are kind of in play with the CFD. And it makes them a unique aspect when it comes to investing. So we'll link up. It's actually a web page that has kind of what was essentially at the time some current rules and things like that for different places and different states. As always, talk to an attorney, talk to a real estate attorney to make sure all that stuff is current for your understanding. But there are a lot of these types of products out on the market for you guys to invest in. So it's just like another thing to kind of look at. And in this case, if it's a note that you can essentially maybe avoid a foreclosure on and instead go, say, the eviction route, there's some timeline, you can shorten some timeline stuff. You can obviously shorten or decrease the amount of operating expenses sometimes if you're not having to pay for a full foreclosure. So it makes it really unique to do these if they make sense, again, for the states and areas that you happen to be investing in.
I like it. Well, hopefully the collateral's in better shape than the ones I bought. Again,
it looks like it is. So again, we talked a little bit about that before. Has some of that gotten cleaned up? Where are you at on that?
It hasn't. Well, it hasn't for two reasons. One, I've been busy focusing on higher and better issues. Sure. As I said, I didn't spend a lot of money on these CFDs. It was me spending my money to kind of go learn.
Yeah.
And I'm treating it, okay, here's a great way to look at it. I have extra books on my bookshelf. It's not every book that I've read. I'm going to get to it. It's just not a priority right now.
Sure.
If that makes sense. But I mean, these things still, it's such not a priority is it's a matrix based off of how the low price that I paid for them and is the other stuff I've got going on that's of higher and better value of my time, which I think in a good, unique way goes into something I was thinking about for my goals for this year, and part of my business plan is changing things around. And part of selling off, that asset in Canton and some of the other stuff we're selling right now has been predicated upon, what projects do we actually want to be working on? What are going to be the highest and best value of my time here? And I think some of these CFDs and I think some of the relationships are going to be great and great for a lot of people. And I even actually think the ones that I have will be good. But I just currently have other projects that, somehow are taking precedent right now.
Well, and speaking of that, we've mentioned it now for a couple of episodes, but the Life in Air book, which is really confusing because I thought it was like Life in Air, which was bizarre. It's actually like Millionaire, but with life in front of it. Anyway, that book recommendation that came to us from a good friend of ours, Dan Satosky, I got a chance to talk with him a little bit when I was up in Jersey and, sitting down after having read that book, and kind of like you're saying, kind of not necessarily shaking everything up, but definitely looking at where your time is best spent, on different projects, different types of deals, different areas, different states, whatever the case is, and getting a moment to sit with him and basically be like, well, here's the things, that I'm going to be focusing on for this year. The list is very small. It fits on a Post-it note, right? And to get an opportunity to sit and talk with him kind of about that, as he's really kind of a pro at the style and the procedures that are kind of mentioned in that book. And of course he had a big grin on his face, just understanding that, the digestion of that book was actually happening and getting to the point of not just, working for the sake of working and kind of understanding where real value kind of comes from. So it was really interesting and getting a moment to actually sit with him and really talk with him about it. And it was really cool. So. And
I got a chance to talk with Dan when we were at IMN. And I think the book was great. It was actually what I was just talking about. It's balancing along with the way of the peaceful warrior compared to reading something like The Science of Getting Rich, where Life in Air's focuses on building a rich life. Though reality is addressed in it that we all need money, so let's not lose sight of that. It's not that far out into la la land of you can just sit in a chair and will it and it will happen kind of stuff. You do have to take some action, and it's just a different approach. And I think it's we always talk about who you being influenced by, and I had a great flight. The flight to Puerto Rico, I was talking to my buddy Brian. who lives out in California. And we were just going over influences and, talking about the difference between Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone and some of these other people. And I'm like, I like, 70% of what they say. I saw a thing from Grant Cardone the other day telling youth kids, high school, college students, not to travel, that they need to focus on making a bunch of money first so that they can live it up like he's doing. And I was like, well, to be honest, like when I go to Bali, if you just want to hang out with a bunch of other rich people, cool. The Four Seasons is a blast. But if you actually want to immerse yourself in a culture, like, to be honest, when you're 55 years old traveling, and everything's taken care of for you, you're not really going to immerse yourself into the culture as much as if you would while you were a youth. So all those things are quite interesting. I think it's just good to consume them, filter them, and keep your takeaways.
Yes, so I agree with you completely. I think I have, since getting what I've needed out of the advice and the I don't want to call them teachings, but of somebody like a Grant Cardone, I think since I've distilled out and kind of gotten what I've needed from that, either from a motivation perspective or an outlook perspective or whatever it is, I have really consumed a lot less of what he puts out there, and him in general, not or specifically. Again, if you're kind of listening to this episode ever after having binged all of the old ones like we hear so often, nothing wrong with any of the old stuff that we talked about regarding it, but really kind of it's almost the genesis or thesis of this year's goal of like only reading the few books, right? Like taking and distilling and filtering out exactly what I can use, need, and kind of go and take action against that thing. And then the rest of it just kind of, it is what it is. It goes by the wayside. Really quickly, something that kind of came up, there was a bunch of stuff that came up in Jersey. One of the items that kind of we keep hearing and heard a bunch while I was there was this idea of sourcing and it being extremely difficult. And somebody had asked if we could address, if not like obviously where we get the deals we get and things like that, but more specifically, just the philosophy that
I need you to repeat that. It's so confusing. Are you talking about where assets are coming from?
Exactly. Sourcing of deals and making sure that this, a bunch of people, and the reason why the question is kind of different is because different people asked it differently, but essentially, either new in the business or had been, kind of had been in it for a little while, and just kind of our philosophy on sourcing deals, how we might approach it differently than say some other people that has kind of been successful for us.
I mean, I don't know that we do, to be honest. I mean, listen to the people we have on the show. Most of us are all buying from the same people. And, more often than not, we're willing to in person share who we're buying assets from or introduce other people to asset managers. And I guess my response would that be keep going to events. Like that's where the people that are selling assets and buying assets are at. So I think part of that is it's actively doing it. Maybe that's the different philosophy. There's a lot of people talking about it. I don't know if there's as many people actually doing it. I don't know. I don't know that we have a different philosophy to it. I don't know there's a philosophy involved in buying assets. I don't. Maybe I'm just confused this morning by the way you worded that, Chase.
Well, I think the issue that they were having was, they'll hear Eddie Speed come on our show during his interview and basically say, if you're someone who's buying off the internet, you're not, understand the part of the food chain you're at, right? Or they're just wanting to maybe continue to grow, continue to take their business in the right direction. And they were wanting to make sure that...
Oh, okay. I got a great answer. And it's me being snide, to be honest.
Okay.
Go create the situation you want. Stop asking other people to do it. That's the best philosophy. If we want different assets, I'm going to call people and I'm going to go make it happen and create that situation. In the sense of asking for the philosophy, you're asking for us to tell you how you should go buy your notes. Mm-hmm. You need to go figure out how to buy your notes and buy from that place. And then you don't care what anyone else thinks. The philosophy is, I had my mentor tell me not to buy a note with equity. We bought a note with equity and made 50% ROI. You've got people who say don't buy in Chicago. I'm making money in Chicago. You got people who don't want to buy condos. I buy condos in Florida all the time. Deal with Safe Harbor. I'm making money. But I'm creating what I want. I'm not listening to, I'm listening to what everybody says, but I'm also a hyper contrarian sometimes. So when you tell me not to buy in Chicago, that's where I'm going to go spend all my money. Now the catch is I've got enough tenacity and patience, and I've learned that Chicago is an absolute nightmare. But when I wake up from my dream, I smile at my reality, and I've got no problem dealing with it. The catch is most people that we know, we interact with in this space, don't have the patience to hold out 2 years or 2.5 years, or they can't sell their investors on 2.5 years because they haven't done it themselves. If you haven't put your own money into one of those deals, I mean, the philosophy behind that also is why in the world would somebody else put their money behind you if you're not willing to put yours in first? So, I think part of those are the philosophies that you need to take an approach at. Go create your own reality.
So I'm really excited that you answered the question that way, because I didn't say it quite as eloquently as you just did. But to many of the people that had asked it, I essentially said the same thing. I was trying to be not as vague as possible, but I definitely wanted to get the answer from you that I essentially gave them in person, right? I just wanted to make sure, or not make sure, but get your take on it, which is essentially the same thing. And it actually reminded me of something that, and this is a quote, but George Bernard Shaw says, and he says, "The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man." And it's essentially taking this idea of being unreasonably question authority, not to the point of your own detriment, right? Like, sure, there are good practices, no question. But like you just listed off 3 or 4 different things that others have said, don't go do this thing, it won't work, right? And well, that's funny. And you tend to have a less populated playground, because everyone else isn't going to go do those things.
Here's the other part of where that stuff comes from. When I talk to friends of mine, they're like, "Oh, your life's so easy." And I was like, "Yes, it is. It's extremely easy." And for me, because if you had to do this, it'd be too hard for you. And the reality of that is it's a mindset thing. So the person that says Chicago's a bad place to invest, they're right. It goes back to whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe he can achieve. Or whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So if you tell me not to go buy deals with equity because you can't make money off of them, you're right. You can't make money off of deals with equity. I can, because I'm going to analyze it to the point it makes sense to me, and I understand that I can profit from the deal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. That's a good point to at least suss out for themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's also the mindset thing. The people that are like, "Oh, there's no inventory." You're right. There is no inventory. None for you. So don't go buy me. Go quit. Go do something else. Go be the other 80% of everything that you've done the rest of your life and quit. It's fine. Don't be the 20%. Don't worry about it. It's too tough. By the way, that's just me being challenging to nobody. If you're questioning yourself in your head right now, please email us or ask for a book or something, because we would love to be supportive. But, be realistic at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's also the big point of it. Of course, we would love to be supportive, but at the same time, spinning the wheels and what have you is not going to help you or anyone else. So make sure take it up as the mantle of challenge, as opposed to, wow, those guys over on that Note podcast are kind of jerks, right? Anything else for the people for this week, Mr. Woods?
I'm still waiting for a check from Franklin County, that property that we sold at auction.
Oh, right.
After listing on Facebook. Still waiting for the check. Gosh, the government's got a sweet float going on right now up there, I'm sure. So that's an interesting thing. It's realizing the deal is finished, but the deal's still not done. And you just kind of like, okay, I'm wanting to close the book, or, close this chapter of the book and go on to the next. So that's happening. What else do we got? We got some stuff in Chicago. We had a Chicago remodel. Oh my goodness. The contractor did such a good job. We have a full price offer, less than a week of it going up. So that's awesome. Congrats to him for doing an awesome job.
That's incredibly impressive.
We got our last squatter out of the building in Chicago. By the way, and here, I'll give you another another good example. I got the bill from the process servicer that handles the actual eviction. So people could do it different ways. If you're boots on the ground and you want to show up in the hood and you want to be there when the sheriff shows up to do an eviction, you can do that. And you can do your own locksmithing and change your own locks and all this other stuff, which for me would mean I got to take a 3-hour flight. I got to get a hotel. I got to get a rental car. I got to be there. I got to stay at the hotel, eat a bad breakfast, potentially, hopefully a good one, get back on the airplane for another 3 hours and fly back to Florida. So instead, I got to spend about $2,000 to have my process servicer, 5 guys, and an off-duty police officer. So I basically effectively paid to have 7 people there for 4 hours for this crazy guy's eviction. And they had to call the cops a second time. So you got to love it, just because that's stuff that goes on in Chicago. So yeah, $2,000. Now that's not what I paid the court cost to have it done. It's not what I paid my attorney to do all the paperwork. And that was just for one eviction for one unit in Chicago. So it's it's one of those things to stay on top of, which is why I said the situation in Canton, Ohio is very different than the situation in Chicago, because Chicago is so expensive. I am very much on top of what's going on out there to make sure that I'm not being blood dry every time somebody elects to not pay the rent.
I agree. Delightful. I guess I'd kind of forgot about that deal that you had just mentioned that we had done at auction that had sold through Facebook. That was a unique scenario. Are we going to have any specific numbers on that one? For the
yes, because I need to wait to get the check because I lost money on that deal. So
okay,
I've got
good.
two deals.
Well, not good, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no. It's actually good. I'm happy I lost money on the deal because in reality I could have lost a lot more. And given this goes one of those deals where I was talking to somebody. The information I had when I bought this deal was justified the price, and it was a good deal. The reality of the situation was it wasn't as valuable, and there was some extra damage and things that we missed. So that's why we didn't make money. But I can't be upset about it. You do this many deals, you're gonna lose money at some point. I guess I would say that the person that's never lost money, either keep going, you're so good, or you're just not firing enough shots. I don't like losing money, but I did learn some good lessons from it that won't be repeated on the next go round.
Sure. I definitely agree with that. So we'll potentially a few numbers for this next go around on the next show, which will be delightful, and I'm very excited about that. If there was any events or other things that you were planning to attend in the coming months, we had a super busy January. I spoke at like 3 different events. You were at 2 different events. So I just didn't know if there was anything on your radar. I wasn't sure if there was a Spring Note Expo, but there is not. It's actually happening in November. So
no, I'm just kind of hanging out right now. I did my vacation calendar planning. So excited about that. A lot more excited about that than note travel, but I am excited to do some note traveling. Let's be honest. I like to see my note family. I like the beach too.
Yes.
So it's
I definitely can concur with that. I already did my particular note, or my note travel. I've already got booked and managed the family travel that we'll be having this year, so I'm very excited about that. As well, I took a cue from you and just kind of did it, planned it, and I don't know if you've already done this, but technically you already paid for it. So that was something that was not part of who I was as a person prior to meeting Mr. Robert Woods. But now that I'm in this boat, it makes my wife very happy. She's super pumped about this year's kind of travel plans, which is nice.
I love it, dude.
Yeah, I look, man, it was a huge inspiration you gave me on that.
Good. Well, more to come on that one. Till next week.
For sure. All righty. Well, very cool. That would leave the only event coming up I think that is worth noting is the same one I mentioned last week. Talked a little bit about it when I was out at New Jersey, but the marketing event I'm doing here in San Antonio in just a few weeks. I'm very excited about it. If you want a link to that, go check it out, show notes. And thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Note NBA podcast. If this is your first time here, head over to iTunes, give us a rating, a review, and of course, subscribe. As always, everything we've talked about will be in the show notes over at noteba.com. Just click on the big orange button on the homepage. That'll take you to the most recent episode. And as always, remember to tell 5 other people you know this week about the Note NBA podcast. We'll see you guys later.
Take it easy, guys. Thanks for listening.